The glass doors to Ellison and Brooks' headquarters hissed open at precisely 8:01 a.m. A man walked in wearing dark jeans, a black pullover, and sneakers that looked too ordinary for the marble floor beneath them. He carried nothing but a slim leather notebook under one arm. The receptionist, Brianna, barely glanced up. "Deliveries go around the back," she said, still typing. "I'm not a delivery," the man replied calmly. She looked up, taking him in now. Mid-40s, clean-shaven, steady gaze. "No tie. No badge. No briefcase. You here for someone?" she asked, her tone polite but clipped. "Board meeting," he said, and gave a small smile. "Ninth floor." She blinked. "You're with one of the teams?" "No. I'm attending." She paused. No suit. No name she recognized. She picked up the phone and called upstairs. As it rang, she kept watching him. He wasn't fidgeting. Just standing there like he belonged, which only made her more certain he didn't. "Yes, hi, there's someone here, says he's going to the board meeting," she said into the phone, covering the receiver. "What was your name?" "Victor." "Victor." She waited. "Just Victor." That didn't help. She turned slightly, cupping the phone again. "Look, I don't want to be rude, but this meeting is for senior leadership only. Without a full name, I can't. "I'll wait," Victor said. He stepped aside, out of the way, and stood by the wall. He didn't look impatient. He didn't look surprised. He looked like someone who had been through this more times than she could guess. And this time, the wait wouldn't be long. At 8:09 a.m., the elevator dinged. Two men in tailored suits stepped out. One was Michael from operations, the other Richard from finance. Both mid-level, both regulars in that conference room upstairs. They headed straight toward the reception desk, coffee cups in hand mid-conversation. Then they saw Victor. Richard gave him a once-over. Slowed. Whispered something to Michael, who glanced over and chuckled. Brianna leaned forward. "He says he's here for the board meeting," she told them in a low voice. Michael raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" he said, a little too loudly. Victor didn't turn his head. He kept his eyes on the elevators, hands in his pockets. "Don't worry," Michael said to Brianna. "We'll be sure security clears the floor." He nodded at Victor. "You might want to try again later." "Wrong building, maybe?" Victor gave the smallest nod, not of agreement, just acknowledgement. Like he heard the words but didn't feel the need to respond. Richard looked at him again. "Who'd you say you were with?" Victor didn't answer. Michael shrugged and turned away. "Guy won't be there long," he muttered. They walked past him and stepped into the elevator. As the doors started to close, Michael tapped the button to keep them open. He looked at Victor. "You sure you don't need the delivery entrance?" Victor stepped in silently. The doors closed. Inside, no one spoke. The numbers on the panel lit up one by one. The tension didn't rise. It settled, like fog filling a room. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. The ninth floor looked different from the rest of the building, quieter, cleaner, colder. Walls of frosted glass and dark wood, carpet that muffled footsteps, and silence that made every sound feel louder than it was. Victor stepped out first. Michael and Richard hung back, whispering behind him now. Their laughter had stopped. The receptionist on this floor, an older woman named Karen, stood when she saw them. But then she spotted Victor. She hesitated, then frowned. Victor walked toward the boardroom at the end of the hallway. The door was ajar. Inside, men and women in expensive suits stood around the oval table, pouring coffee, checking tablets, reviewing notes. The meeting hadn't started. A man at the head of the table, the interim COO, Gerald Lang, looked up. He froze mid-sentence. Victor walked in calmly, set his notebook on the table, and pulled out the chair at the head. Nobody spoke. Someone cleared their throat. Another looked at Gerald, unsure. Victor sat down. His tone was casual, but it filled the room. "Let's not waste time. We've got a lot to clean up." Karen stood silently by the door. Michael and Richard had just reached the entrance when she whispered, "That's him." Richard blinked. "Him who?" Karen swallowed. "The new CEO." Richard stopped short in the doorway. Michael's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Inside the room, a few people stiffened in their chairs. Others exchanged glances. Gerald Lang stepped back from the table slowly, unsure whether to sit, speak, or leave. Victor opened his notebook, flipped a page, and didn't look up. "I'll keep it short," he said. "I've reviewed the last 3 quarters. Performance is not the issue. Culture is." A low cough from someone across the table. No one else moved. Victor finally looked up. "Half the board didn't even bother to learn who was replacing your last CEO. That's fine. What isn't fine is what that says about how this company sees people who don't look like they usually do." The room went quiet again. Gerald managed a half-smile, trying to recover. "Victor, I think there's been some..." Victor cut in. "Not confusion. Just assumption." His voice didn't rise. He didn't need it to. Karen turned from the doorway. She didn't want to watch what came next. Michael and Richard stayed outside the room now, frozen near the wall, trying to become invisible. Neither had sat down. Neither would speak again for a while. Victor closed his notebook. "This meeting's starting now," he said. "If anyone thinks they're in the wrong room, now's the time to leave." No one moved, but everyone was thinking. Victor's eyes scanned the room. No one left, but several looked like they wanted to, not out of protest, but discomfort. The kind that came when the mask slips and you realize it had been on the whole time. The silence wasn't awkward. It was necessary. Gerald, still standing, slowly eased into his seat. He didn't speak again. Victor tapped a finger on the table once, then leaned forward slightly. Let's talk about retention, he said. Not the numbers. The people. The ones who leave quietly. The ones who stay but stop raising their hands. A woman near the far end of the table, HR lead Dana, nodded faintly, almost involuntarily. Victor saw it. 3 resignations last month from your engineering division, he said, flipping a page. All 3 cited the same reason in exit interviews. They didn't feel seen. Or heard. Or like they had a path forward. Nobody replied. They didn't say the culture was toxic, Victor continued. They said it was tired. Tired of itself. Tired of change. Tired of people who didn't look or talk the same trying to lead. Someone shifted in their chair. Victor sat back. I didn't come here to be liked, he said simply. But I did come here to rebuild something worth staying for. And just like that, the temperature in the room changed. Not from heat. From recognition. Victor let the room sit in that stillness. He wasn't trying to impress them. He wasn't selling anything. He was telling them how things were going to be. Across the table, Dana adjusted her glasses. She didn't look up. Gerald tapped a pen against his notepad once, then stopped, realizing the sound carried too much weight now. The youngest board member, Jordan, late 30s, tech background, new to the table, broke the silence. What does rebuilding look like, exactly? He asked, his voice careful, measured. Victor didn't hesitate. It starts with who gets heard, he said. Who gets space to speak? Who gets dismissed before they finish a sentence? He looked across the table, then toward the glass walls, where reflections showed Michael and Richard still standing outside. Victor kept his eyes there. Like who's told to use the service entrance? Or asked which company they're delivering for. Before anyone checks the roster. The room was quiet again. Not defensive. Not hostile. Just still. Karen, still nearby, turned slightly toward the conference room. Victor didn't look at her, but he knew she was listening. Everyone was. He didn't call anyone out by name. He didn't have to. The message had landed. Gerald shifted in his seat again, then finally leaned forward, clearing his throat. I think it would help, he said cautiously, if everyone knew a little more about your background. Just who, he hesitated, provide some context. Victor tilted his head slightly. You mean explain why I'm qualified to sit here? Gerald gave a tight smile. I didn't mean it that way. But it's what you meant. There was no heat in Victor's voice. Just truth spoken without apology. He opened his notebook again, flipped to a page near the back. I've led 3 turnarounds in the last 10 years. One was bleeding millions in operational losses. We brought it back to record profit in 18 months. Another had a lawsuit hanging over it. Settled without admission, restructured from the board down. He paused. Third one had a culture problem. Deep. Layered. Quiet. Fixed that too. He closed the book gently. Your investors didn't just hire someone with a clean resume. They hired someone who's lived the part of the outsider and still built the room. Jordan nodded slowly. Dana sat up straighter. Gerald didn't respond. Victor glanced toward the door again, where Michael and Richard were gone now or hiding out of view. Then he looked back to the boardroom. I'm not here because I was next in line, he said. I'm here because this company needs to see itself clearly. Then quieter. And I don't need permission to do that. For a moment, no one touched their coffee. No one opened their laptops. Victor's words didn't ask for agreement, they demanded presence. Dana cleared her throat. I've been here 12 years, she said quietly. I've never heard a meeting start like this. Victor met her eyes. That's the problem. She nodded. Slowly. Not in shame, but recognition. Across the table, a senior partner named Alan, mid-60s, polished, always on brand, leaned back in his chair with a tight smile. Well, he said, this is certainly unconventional. Victor didn't smile back. What you call unconventional, he said, others call overdue. Alan's smile faltered. Victor folded his hands on the table. I'm not asking anyone to change overnight. I'm asking for honesty about how this place works and who it works for. He looked around the table. No more backroom hires. No more boardroom nods without questions. No more culture fit code for looks like me. No one argued. Because even those who didn't want to agree knew they couldn't deny it. Not after what they'd seen this morning. Not after what they felt sitting here now. Victor didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight of his presence had already tipped the table. And nobody was sitting quite the same anymore. Outside the conference room, Brianna at the front desk was trying to focus on her screen. She wasn't typing. Just staring at the same email for too long. The way he had said it, board meeting, 9th floor, was still in her head. She hadn't believed him. She hadn't even asked for his full name. Inside, Victor continued, speaking calmly. There's something this company's been good at, he said. Politeness. A few board members looked up, unsure where he was going. But polite doesn't fix what's broken. Polite covers it. Makes it quieter. Easier to deny. He turned slightly, making eye contact with each of them. I've read every internal memo from the last year. Polite language in exit interviews. Polite silences in meetings when real issues came up. Polite nods when promotions didn't make sense but no one wanted to ask why. Dana glanced down. Alan shifted again but didn't speak. Victor leaned back in his chair. I don't want polite, he said. I want honest. I want uncomfortable. I want people who are more interested in doing what's right than what's routine. The room didn't push back. They knew he was right. They just hadn't expected to be told so directly. Especially not by the man they almost turned away in the lobby. Victor paused. Looked at no one in particular. But if polite is all you're after, he said finally, I'm not your guy. The room sat in an uneasy quiet. Not hostile. Just exposed. Victor didn't press. He let the silence do the work. Gerald finally spoke again, voice softer this time. You're asking us to look at everything differently. I'm asking you to look at it honestly, Victor said. Not the slide decks. Not the mission statement. The hallway conversations. The looks. The decisions made before meetings even start. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The words were heavier that way. Across the table, a board member named Priya, usually quiet, rarely first to speak, leaned forward. Do you think we're too far gone? She asked. Victor considered the question. No, he said. But you're too comfortable. And comfort's a slow rot. Several eyes dropped to the table. Companies don't fail because of spreadsheets, Victor continued. They fail when they stop noticing who's no longer in the room. Outside the conference room, Brianna finally stood from her desk and walked toward the far wall. She checked the hallway monitor, still scrolling through the list of conference rooms, times, guests. His name wasn't even listed. He didn't need it to be. Inside, Victor looked down at his notebook again, then closed it. I didn't come in today with a speech, he said. I came in with a mirror. No one dared ask what they looked like in it. The meeting ended without the usual shuffle of chairs or rustle of jackets. People stood slowly, quietly, like they weren't quite sure what to do next. Victor remained seated. He didn't check his phone, didn't glance at the clock, just watched them, each person with that same steady expression. The one that didn't accuse but didn't let anyone off the hook either. Dana lingered by the door. She met his eyes for a moment, then nodded once. Small but real. She left without a word. Gerald stayed behind. You've made an impression, he said, forcing a thin smile. Victor looked at him. You mean I disrupted the way things were? Gerald hesitated. That too. Victor stood. Good. That was the point. As Victor walked out of the boardroom, the hallway seemed longer than before. Empty, polished, echoing footsteps in a way that made people turn. Michael and Richard were near the elevators. They didn't say anything. Richard looked away. Michael forced a smile, half-hearted. Victor didn't stop. Brianna stood behind her desk as he approached. Her posture was straighter now. I didn't know who you were earlier, she said quietly. Victor stopped. You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect. Her face flushed. I understand, she said, voice low. Victor nodded once. Not dismissing her. Just acknowledging. He pushed through the front doors into the late morning light and left the building behind him a little quieter than it had been when he walked in. Back inside, the boardroom hadn't emptied completely. Alan remained staring out the window. Gerald sat at the table, pen in hand, not writing anything. Just tapping. The way people do when their thoughts are louder than they want to admit. Priya was still by the door. She turned to Gerald. He's right, you know. Gerald didn't answer. He made us look at what we've ignored, she continued. What we've allowed. Alan finally spoke. It's not that simple. It is, Priya said. We've made it complicated to protect ourselves. Alan turned. You think he's going to change everything? I think he already has, she said, her voice calm. The question is whether any of us are willing to do the same. Downstairs, Brianna sat back at her desk. She didn't open her email. She opened a blank document, typed a few words, deleted them, started again. Upstairs, Gerald leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low. We're not used to being told we're the problem. Maybe it's time we get used to it, Priya replied. The room was quiet again, not from shock, from reflection. By noon, the building was buzzing in its own restrained way. Not loud, not obvious, but people were talking. In the executive assistant's Slack channel. Did you see who that was this morning? He just walked right in. No entourage, no assistant. And now the boardroom's locked down. Something happened. In the cafeteria, someone said he heard the new CEO called everyone out before they'd even introduced themselves. Another said he watched the man get stopped at the front desk twice. Some didn't believe it. Others had seen it. The facilities manager told a colleague in a whisper, I passed him on the way in. Looked like just a regular guy. No badge. No attitude. Security talked less. Too many eyes on them. Upstairs, the board had split off, some returning to their offices, some pretending to work, all quietly revisiting their part in the morning. Victor, meanwhile, didn't go back to the top floor. He didn't need to. Instead, he walked through the lower levels, not inspecting, just being there. People watched. Some smiled politely, unsure. Others stared and then looked away. He stopped in front of a glass door labeled Diversity and Inclusion. Knocked once. Then walked in. The room was small. 2 desks. A few framed posters about belonging, teamwork, and equity. The kind that feel printed in bulk. At one of the desks sat Maria Alvarez, head of D&I for the past 4 years. She looked up, startled. "Can I help?" Then she saw who it was. She stood quickly. "Mr. Caldwell, sorry, Mr. Carter." Victor gave a faint smile. "Victor is fine." Maria looked nervous. Not scared. Just uncertain. Like she hadn't expected to be seen today, let alone visited. "I just wanted to stop by," Victor said, "and say I read your reports." She blinked. "My quarterly memos?" "All of them." Maria exhaled. "Most people don't." "I noticed," he said. "They're not taken seriously enough. They read more like warnings than updates." She nodded slowly. "That's what they are." Victor leaned against the edge of her desk. "Not casual, intentional. Equal footing. You've been writing about things this company hasn't had the stomach to deal with," he said. "That's changing." Maria hesitated. "You mean you're really going to, eh?" "Yes," Victor said, cutting gently but clearly. "Not just a panel or some new mission statement. Real structure. Real authority." She didn't speak right away. "Then you don't know how long I've been waiting for someone to say that." Victor met her gaze. "I do." And she believed him. By the end of the day, no memo went out. No formal announcement. No internal email with bullet points or summaries. But everyone knew. From the front desk to the top floor, the atmosphere had shifted, not because of a speech, not even because of authority, but because someone walked in and didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. In the break room, someone said he didn't even correct them when they questioned him. Another replied, didn't have to. Just waited. Karen, the receptionist on 9, sat a little straighter at her desk that afternoon. She caught her reflection in the monitor and looked longer than usual. In the elevator, Michael and Richard rode down in silence. One glanced at the other, about to speak, then stopped. There wasn't much left to say. Brianna stayed late, rewriting an email she was supposed to send hours ago. Not because she had to, because something in her had started to shift. And upstairs, in that same boardroom, Gerald sat alone for a moment, flipping through his notes. He wasn't sure what would come next, but he knew the days of quiet avoidance were over. Victor Carter didn't need to remind anyone who he was. They would remember how they treated him before they knew. That would stay with them. And maybe, just maybe, it would be enough to change what happened next time.